Closing arguments are scheduled to start in the lori-vallow-Daybell trial tomorrow. Vallow is the Eastern Idaho mom charged with murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and grand theft in the deaths of her two kids, JJ and Tylee, and her husband's late wife, Tammy Daybell. Now, we've been covering every aspect of this trial since the beginning, and while there are a lot of recurring themes in this case, at the center of it is the extreme religious beliefs. I caught up with the journalist and author of the book, When the Moon Turns to Blood, to shed light on this topic as it applies to this case. From the light and dark spirits to talks of zombies and end times, extreme religious views have played out in court throughout the lori-vallow-Daybell trial.
At first it was, they were working under the contract of Satan.
When Lori and Chad met, they started to believe themselves to be these prophesied leaders of the 144,000 that are in the book of Revelation. They thought that was them, and that it was up to them to choose who would go forward towards, being resurrected and ascending. And so that is a big part of this case.
Leah Satilli is a journalist and the author of the book When the Moon Turns to Blood, which dives into the religious motivations of Lori and her fifth and current husband, Chad Daybell, the disappearance of Lori's kids, JJ and Tylee, and the discovery of their remains on Chad's property in June of 2020.
Did Lori ever tell you whether or not an evil spirit had entered Tylee?
Yes.
Did she ever tell you if JJ was taken over or possessed by an evil spirit?
Yes.
Over the years, I've reported on these kind of fringes of the LDS church where people are really prepping up big food stores, maybe stores of guns and things like that, prepping for the end. But where Lori and Chad go even further to the fringe is they talk about things like zombies and light and dark spirits. I gotta say, even with the most radical militiamen that I've spoken with that believe in these end times ideas, I have not heard them talk about anything around zombies or light and dark spirits. So I think that just goes to show how out there this case is.
She adds, it's important to note, these are not the beliefs held by the mainstream members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
The church has really tried to separate themselves from these groups. Lori and Chad had a tight community of people around them who were entertaining these ideas of light and dark spirits and zombies and people transforming into another person that could then be eliminated.
And while the true crime community has been following this case and trial closely, Leah says this is so much more.
Even though they held these really fringe beliefs, they weren't wearing camo and carrying an AR-15 at the Capitol and sort of wearing these costumes that we recognize as maybe sort of extreme. These are people who were, going to yoga classes and were, members of their local LDS ward. So I think that it's a little bit of a wake-up call for everyone to really look at, when people start talking about beliefs that are religious, that are extreme, that maybe we all need to pay a little bit closer attention to what the wider implications of those could be.
Leah was in court the first couple of weeks. She says she's a reporter, so she wants to see this through the end. She adds she's going to add a new chapter to her book about what happens in the trial. But again, closing arguments are set for tomorrow. The jury has 39 instructions to go over before closing arguments, and I will be there and update you on what happens right here on the news at 4, as well as the news at noon and 6 o'clock. And you can also follow at ktvb.com.